We welcome you back to another Bible study here in the book of Mark. And we focused on several thoughts actually last time. And I want to just sort of continue and maybe finish out this chapter today. But there is a special part that I really want to deal with. And we may not necessarily get to all of the rest here because there is some good stuff here that we probably should spend some more time on. But in verse 38, we have the mentality or the idea that we so often can get into ourselves. And I want to deal with that a little bit. In Mark chapter 9, verse 38, "And John answered him," referring to Jesus, "saying, Master, we saw one casting out devils in thy name, and he followeth not us, and we forbade him because he followeth not us." Now, doesn't that sound a little bit like us sometimes? It seems as though we can get so focused on, well, who belongs to my group or who do I identify with the closest? And sometimes that can really be a real challenge to the work of God going forward. And so I want to spend a little time on that today because it's so common for us as well. Now, again, recognize what this group or this person was doing. And he says here, actually, we saw one. I don't know if there were more than just one or not, but we saw somebody that was casting out devils. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, obviously, we would recognize, well, that's positive. That's on the same track. And yet, because he wasn't a disciple, specifically a disciple, probably very possibly was following after God, but wasn't one of the 12 at least. And so John says, we told him to stop. You don't have any business casting out devils if you're not with us. Or you're not one of the elite circle or whatever. And Jesus said, verse 39, "Forbid him not, for there is no man which shall do a miracle in my name that can lightly speak evil of me." And notice that he's saying here, the power that's demonstrated is a greater test than just whether or not he's part of our group. And so often we need reminded of that. It's easy for us to get in our minds what we think how we think things ought to be, or you need to belong to my group. You need to do things just like we do them. Whatever. There's a whole variety of ways. Even the place that we go for. Where's our headquarters, or maybe in some cases, what is a key issue for us? And there's been a number of them through the years that sometimes I even heard of one where even at a camp meeting, it sounded like about the first thing whenever you greet somebody, well, what do you see? How do you see this issue? And if you agree, then you're in. If you don't agree or you see things a little differently, well, then you're not in. I can't have fellowship with you. That's not the way that Jesus showed us. And in verse 40, he goes on, he says, "For he that is not against us is on our part." So let me ask you a question today. Do you see those who don't maybe see things just exactly like you do? Do they seem to be an enemy, or are they a helper? Are they somebody that is emphasizing the same things as far as the same gospel message that we are? Or do we sometimes get so caught up in, well, you don't cross your T the same way I do, or maybe you don't quite follow exactly the way I see it? Obviously, there's some things, if it's in God's Word, we need to stick by it. But it's so often that we can start to get critical, and we're wrangling with one another to try to see, do you really fit into my category? And so we need to be careful about that again today. And then he goes on a little bit further. I'll just mention a little bit here. He talks about offenses. And he even gets so far as to refer to our own hand or our own foot offending us. But beyond that is, what about when we offend someone else? You see, what he ends up saying here is, if your hand offends you, it's better to cut it off and get to heaven than to enter eternity whole but not be prepared spiritually. Same thing with the foot. He says, if your foot offends you, cut it off. That sounds like it's pretty drastic, but what he's saying here is there's nothing in our life that's worth missing heaven over. But notice what he also said just before that, whosoever shall offend, he uses that same word, whosoever shall offend one of these little ones. Could I paraphrase just slightly? There in, that's verse 42, it'd be better for you to be cut off. Now that's pretty dramatic. That's pretty serious. But if we're not careful, we can get so caught up in wrangling almost that we bring offense that could cause someone else to miss heaven. And we need to recognize that if we are that offense, then God may see that it'd be better for us to be taken out of the way. And that seems to be what he's referring to here. And so I want to just urge us, let's be careful. The latter part of this chapter is so serious, talking about, really about hellfire. He's saying about that, there's different ways. Verse 40, 43, 45, 47, each of those referring to hellfire. And he's referring to it different ways, like if your hand would keep you out of heaven, it would put you in hellfire, it'd be better to cut it off. Your foot, your eye, each of those. And so he is kind of making that comparison there, that sometimes if we're not careful, we might be tempted to cut someone else off because they don't follow after us. They're not quite like us. Maybe they don't see everything just eye to eye like I do. And so we might be tempted to cut them off, but in reality, I know this is maybe hard for us to even think of, but God may sometimes think it'd be better for you to be cut off out of that person's life than that you would offend them to the point where they miss heaven. Pretty serious stuff. But may God help us to have a mindset of unity. Now, again, I understand there are some aspects where we need to hold to the truth no matter what division it may cause. We don't have to do it divisively, though. Sometimes, in many cases at least, how we deal with that division or how we deal with that separation is key as well. And so God help us that we wouldn't be of the mindset of the disciples here and say, oh, we don't have anything to do with them. They're not part of us. And so we tell them to stop and we tell them to basically, they don't have any part of us and they don't have any business doing this. God help us not to be offensive. Even when sometimes there may be some disagreements or we're not all part of the same group, but to thank God for the chances we have to meet together in unity. And right now, even we're a part of a camp meeting where there's people from all over the place. And even if we don't all see exactly eye to eye, it's nice to be able to worship together and to feel like we're going to the same heaven together, even though we don't always agree with everything. And so today, I just urge you, let's be careful about the division lines that we draw and ask God to help us to really, truly recognize, verse 40, if they're not against us, they're for us. And may God help us to have the eyes, the mind of Christ when it comes to those who may not always agree. Well, God bless you this week, and we'll hope to be back with you again soon. And let's keep studying His Word together as we move on into Mark chapter 10.